Welcome to today's episode of me reviewing highlights. I hope today's topics are fun. So let's get started. The first one is getting things done. Is there too much complaining in your culture? The next time someone moans about something, try asking, so what's the next action? People will complain only about something that they assume could be better than it currently is. The action question forces the issue. If it can be changed, there's some action that will change it. If it can't, it must be considered part of the landscape to be incorporated in strategy and tactics. I think this goes a little bit beyond productivity, right? There is, it's kind of like key to having a calm demeanor. That if you can change it, okay, talk about the next action and change it. There is this thing, I think in this book, Think Again by Adam Grant. There is this thing that how do you break up or not break up, but how do you uh, have a conversation with somebody with a radical viewpoint? How do you basically change their mind? Which you can't. There is this. It's kind of established that you can't change anybody's mind. But how do you start having a conversation with them? And the idea is to basically change the conversation from why to how. So we get very much lost in the why of things. When we get charged, when we get kind of in this mode of that we're just complaining or we are discouraged and we can't really do anything about it, shifting the conversation to how or what's the next action, because that makes you think about the how. Um, that forces the change. That forces you to move ahead. And like this passage says, if it can't be changed, then it's part of the landscape, and you can't do anything about it. You work around it. So yeah, let's move on. Thanks for the feedback. Appreciation motivates us. It gives us a bounce in our step and the energy to redouble our efforts. When people complain that they don't get enough feedback at work, they often mean that they wonder whether anyone notices or cares how hard they are working. They don't want advice, they want appreciation. I think it's a good reminder. It's a good reminder for me as well. Um, I think I can be particularly lax at this. uh, there is this kind of constant struggle. Okay, I mean, how do you appreciate when you feel that there's not much to talk about over them? So, of course, as a manager, as a leader, this is the challenge. You have to find something to appreciate, um, and not something made up, not something trivial, something that actually makes sense. So that's the challenge, right? That's the hard part about this. So yeah, I think this is, otherwise the passage is pretty clear. Let's move on. Get it done. The principle of dilution helps us determine when it's better to set fewer incentives. Adding incentives and then removing them is disappointing, as the drawing children in lepers study discovered. It further weakens the association between the activity and its original purpose. For that latter reason, adding incentives that you don't care for will also reduce your motivation, even when the incentives remain in place. Right. We have discussed many times on these video series, and it's kind of well established that incentives are a dangerous game. It sometimes feels that, okay, let's just introduce a temporary incentive, but there is nothing like a temporary incentive that works out in the long term. So, this particular, I won't go into the study over here because, again, I have talked about this before. But adding incentives and then removing them, it is frustrating, and I'm sure you can relate to that as well. That if there was an activity for which you were being incentivized in some way and it was reduced, you would suddenly start feeling completely against the idea of that activity, even though that was something originally you did for no reason at all, as a personal pleasure. So yeah, let's move on. Think again. We just mentioned this. We become blinded by arrogance when we are utterly convinced of our strengths and our strategies. We get paralyzed by doubt when we lack conviction in both. We can be consumed by an inferiority complex when we know the right method but feel uncertain about our ability to execute it. What we want to attain is confident humility, having faith in our capability while appreciating that we may not have the right solution or even be addressing the right problem. So, I'm just trying to remember the context over here. And I can't remember the context, but this is kind of a summary of different aspects of, how do you approach a particular project. I think task is too small a word over here. What we want to attain is confident humility, having faith in our capability while appreciating that we may not have the right solution or even be addressing the right problem. Okay, I just can't remember the context. Otherwise, the passage is pretty clear. It's a summary of the different strategies that you might, not strategies, but different traits that you might be demonstrating while completing a project. So I'll move on. Get it done. The clues incentives gives you the clues incentives give you about why you're invested in a new activity can lead you astray whenever they obscure the central reason for pursuing this activity, making you think you're less invested in a certain goal than you actually are. Incentives are even more harmful for motivation when the incentive is a poor match to the activity. I think this is kind of an extension to what we just discussed, in like a couple of passages before, that the incentives are harmful, and this explains one of the reasons why, that the clues that the incentives give you, like incentives tell you a message, give you a message. For example, if you are asked to um, learn at work, and in the knowledge sharing industry, this is kind of common, that you're learning new things while you're working. If you're asked to kind of have a organized learning activity while working on something, you might want to do that for its own benefit, because I believe everybody is interested in learning new things. So you might be doing this anyway. But now, when an incentive is added to it, the incentives are going to kind of, like, for example, an incentive is added that you get a bonus if you learn and demonstrate a new technology, for example. Now, that incentive is going to give you a misleading clue that you're doing this for that bonus, right? And so that's going to kind of lead you astray. And like the last line says, that it's even more harmful when the it's even more harmful for the motivation when the incentive is a poor match to the activity. So if you consider that that bonus, a monetary bonus, for example, it's a poor match to the learning activity, which is I mean, how do you measure learning, right? So it's a poor match to the activity, and in this case, incentive is even more harmful, because it's kind of going to lead you. It's going to associate the act of learning, which is passive, which is unmeasurable. You're going to associate that with a concrete amount. Bonus has specific amount if it's a monetary bonus. So this is going to be even more harmful in the long run. Like I said, we have discussed incentives many times over here. The next one is kill it with fire. We advance, but we advance slowly, while moving tangentially. We abandon patterns only to reinvent them later and sell them as completely new. So I saw this tweet today, which showed basically a desktop telephone. I mean, I don't even know how to describe this today, but it's a desktop telephone, with the handheld receiver and a wired cord and everything. But instead of the button panel, you have a touch screen. And the tweet was, we have come full circle. This is what this tweet is talking about. That basically there's no new technology. I mean, there is, but it's basically kind of a reiteration of what was probably discarded decades ago or years ago. So, like the author says, we advance slowly while moving tangentially. So we are kind of always sticking to that circle of the loop. So that, for example, cloud computing is just time sharing in a new form, for example. And when people are talking about getting off the cloud right now, it's really going back to the personal. When it became easier for desktop computing to be. I mean, it's referring to the time where I think I'm all over the place right now. But I think you get the point, that people are getting off the cloud with by having their own private clouds, in a way, because it's feasible to do that right now. And this mirrors the move from time sharing to personal workstations. So yeah, it feels new. There's nothing new really. It's just we just repeat those patterns, sell them in a new package. That's all. Moving on. The leader's greatest return. We want success without sacrifice, but life doesn't work that way. Success will not be shortchanged. You have to pay the price and it never goes on sale. The best decision you can make for yourself is making decisions against yourself. You have to discipline yourself to do the right things day in and day out, week in and week out, year in and year out. And if you do, the payoff is far greater than the price you paid. Not much to say over here. I think I remembered a different quotation, maybe from a different book. I don't remember which one though. That that it's very hard to have deliberate practice, and I'm thinking it's one of those books on procrastination, or I'm not sure which book that was, but it was about deliberate practice, and it said deliberate practice is the opposite of easy. It is meant to be hard, and I think this pretty much says the same thing. The discipline or the deliberate practice on where you want to be, on what you want to achieve. It is hard. It is like this passage says. I think it says it very nicely that the decision that you're making is against yourself. That's discipline, right? In a way. Let's move on. Remote, not distant. Intentionally designed cultures not only increase employee engagement but also produce stronger business results. Both science and common sense tell you that a positive workplace culture creates a positive business impact. Research shows that organizations with healthy workplace cultures outperform weak or toxic ones. There was this other quote that I read, and again, I'm forgetting which book. I think it's a recent one, maybe, but I'm not remembering it. It's or maybe it could have been an article that the customer experience is never going to be greater than the employee experience. Um, so if you want to increase, if you want to give the best possible experience to the customer, you have to build a best possible experience for your employees as well. And I think this is what this highlight also says. Employee engagement, intentionally designed cultures, and with the intent to increase employee engagement, they produce stronger business results. So let's move on. Don't overthink it. Routines are meant to serve us, not handcuff us. When smartly deployed, these option limiting strategies create freedom by creating headspace, whether we are making museum worthy art or just trying to manage our ordinary days. So, this is kind of paradoxical that discipline actually frees us. This is kind of repeated in other books. For example, I think this one particular stands out, Extreme Ownership, where it's written by a US Navy SEAL, I think, if I remember correctly, or a SEAL trainer. Anyway, someone in the military. And the one of the points in that book was that discipline is actually meant to free you, not constrain you. Because when you are disciplined, or when you're having routines, it may feel that you're not being creative, you're not being organic, but actually that's the opposite, because they kind of eliminate the routine discussions. Um, One of the things I'm doing at work right now is a no meeting week, and in this case, I am trying to be very very deliberate about my schedule. I'm not letting interruptions or schedule meetings. Meetings, even if they're scheduled, they're all over the place. So this routine, which I can design, which I can control, will help me boost productivity for this week at least. And I'm hoping the idea is that it trickles down into the following weeks as well. But yeah, the general idea is that an intentionally designed routine, they're meant to serve us. So let's move on. Stolen focus. You can be reprogrammed in any way that a clever designer wants. Years later, the designers of Instagram asked, if we reinforce our users for taking selfies, if we give them hearts and likes, will they start to do it obsessively, just like the pigeon will obsessively hold out its left wing to get extra seed? They took Skinner's core techniques and applied them to a billion people. So, a Skinner refers to a psychiatrist who studied this kind of this incentive and the reward and punishment method for uh, in psychology. Really, I think a lot of today's social media engagement is built on that. I think something's stuck. I'll just switch off my camera, I guess. I just noticed my camera is stuck, and I think I'll just complete the video anyway. I don't know at what point it got stuck. So please ignore that. I think it's recording. So I just finished the last review, and yeah, I lost track of what I was saying. If you give them hearts and legs. Yeah, I think this passage is pretty clear that how this incentive, the reward punishment techniques were applied in design of social media applications, and how they were designed to addict to basically addict users to these apps, so that they keep coming back, increase the engagement, and so on. And that's really the end of the highlights, and my camera is still frozen. That's weird. Anyway, that's the end of the highlights for today. Thank you for watching.